Good afternoon. I'm Carlene Tyler, Director of Alumni at the college, and it's been a big couple of weeks at the college, and it's not over yet. Today I'm happy to introduce to you Professor Amy Martinez, and Amy teaches English at the college full-time. Amy has 3 sons, and so anyway, but she also plays the violin, quite accomplished violinist.
Well, let's wait till.
Okay.
Let's wait to decide that.
So she agreed to come and share with you all today something about the violin, right?
Yes,
Okay.
I hope so. That's what I brought. So
Good.
That's what you get. I will also do my very best to use my teacher voice. If I'm too quiet, you can go like this. If I'm too loud, you can go like this. And if I'm just boring you to death, you can go like this. Okay? All right. So, yes, by trade, I am an English professor. I'm in my 3rd year of teaching English and public speaking at McPherson College. I truly enjoy every moment that I work there. It's my long-term plan. Carlene, you probably should hear this. It's my long-term plan to teach at the college until I retire, and then I'm just going to go back and volunteer for everything. That's my long-term plan. I have played the violin since I was 4 years old. I started my violin career, hobby, whatever, would have you, on something approximately this size. This is a functional instrument, but of course when you're a 4-year-old it sort of sounds like you got a sack full of cats when you're playing it. This is a small one that I bought for my son. They actually come a little bit smaller if you're very convinced your child is a genius, okay? But I started when I was 4 years old. At the time, we were living, my parents and I, in Chicago, and violin was very popular. There was a new method for teaching the violin called the Suzuki method. Yes, there was actually a Mr. Suzuki that invented it, and his idea was that very small children could learn to play the violin by listening and imitating what they heard. Okay? So I started violin at the age of 4. Of course, I did what a lot of folks do and told my mother I was quitting that and everything else when I was a teenager, right? Isn't that what you're supposed to do when you're a teenager? I hope so. And my mother said, you can quit when you're 18 or independently wealthy, whichever comes first. Guess which one came first? I have this small one because I'm trying to teach one of my sons to play. No one is called animal control to check on the welfare of a possible sack of cats. Yeah, all right. I did continue with private lessons up until I reached college, and I actually started college at Wichita State University as a violin performance major. Now, I had this idea that at Wichita State we were going to sit around and make friends, and we were going to play music together. It didn't turn out that way. It turns out the world of professional music is quite competitive. Besides, this is a joke I'm setting up here. Besides, I wanted to make some money, so of course I switched to education. That was the punchline. I'm glad you got that one. But you know what? Even though I decided not to be a professional musician, I'm so glad my mother didn't let me quit. Now, if she ever asks you, don't tell her I said that, all right? But I did continue to play in the Wichita State University Symphony for all 4 years that I was a student there. I did continue my lessons. And then once I got my teaching career kind of off the ground, I also joined the Hutchinson Symphony Orchestra. It's a community orchestra, mostly not musicians by trade, but we did our best, darn it. I played with the Hutchinson Symphony for 11 years. And then I got a little bit of arthritis going on, so I can't play quite as fast and furious as I used to, but I can still play my very favorite things to play, and that is old hymns. I love those old hymns, and that's what I can play, and that's what I enjoy playing the most. I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then I hope it's all right with you. I prepared some hymns to play. Is this acceptable? Okay. The whole thing still applies. Okay? All right now. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the parts that make up a violin. Of course, you know that these are the strings. On a violin, the strings that you've got are the G, which is the lowest, and the D, and then an A, and then an E, okay? They are tuned in intervals of fifths, for what it's worth, okay? And this is the body of the violin. I've actually had this violin, this one, since I was 15 years old. Just like people, violins get better with age. They do, okay? This one was actually made in the 80s by Gibson. That company also makes guitars. So this violin is American in nature, all right? This part of the violin is referred to as the neck, okay? You might know this already, but violinists do not hold their violins by the neck. If we held them like this, we wouldn't ever be able to move our hand around to hit some different notes. So we actually hold the violin with our chins on this item called a chin rest. You can change out the chin rest. You can get all kinds of different things as to your preference. I have added to mine a shoulder rest because I'm told as necks go, mine is fairly long. So I need a shoulder rest, okay? This little tiny part here is called the bridge. It's small but deceptively important, just like me. Now the bridge, that is something that can break on a violin. Let's say you're 15 and you're not paying attention, and maybe you tripped on your way down from the stage because you wanted to wear your high heels. Well, your bridge might break. It might, but luckily they are replaceable items. What's holding the bridge in place is the tension of the strings. Okay? If there were no bridge holding the strings in place, there's no way that the strings would be able to vibrate and make you some sound. Okay? This top portion of the violin here is called the scroll. I have a very common style of scroll, but I have seen scrolls carved into lions and kings and everything else if you want to be fancy like that. Okay? Then I've got the pegs, which are of course holding up that top portion of the string. Okay? If you're playing along and you hear a peg go pop and turn around, you better stop playing. You're out of tune now. Okay? So I use these to tune the violin. The holes in the violin are surprisingly important. You wouldn't think putting a hole in something would be a great plan. But if there weren't these holes, and they're called F holes because of their shape, like a cursive F, if those holes were not in the violin, then no air could move from the inside to the outside of the violin, which is how the sound is getting to you. Okay? The strings are vibrating. The parts of the violin vibrate as well, although less visibly. And the sound is bouncing around and coming to you from those holes. Essentially, the holes are the amplifiers of the violin. Okay? They make electric violins that you actually plug into an amplifier, but I'm just old-fashioned, so you're stuck with wood today, okay? Do you have any questions for me about the parts of the violin? There's no quiz. Okay, all right. Probably of equal importance to the violin is the bow. Once you get to a certain level of playing, the bow and the violin do not come together. You shop for a violin you like and you shop for a bow that you like. I'm not trying to make a comment on my socioeconomic status, but when my dad bought this for me, I was probably about 16 or so, he bought it for $1,800. That's the sound that he made too. But it's very, very important, this particular piece of wood. You want it to bend. You don't want it to bend too much. You don't want it to be too stiff. Because, of course, when you're playing, the thing that sets the string to vibrating is to run the bow across it. Okay? So, what I've got here on the bow, excuse me, I got a little frog in my throat today. The bow is haired. This is horse hair, okay? Synthetics are available. You probably ought to replace the horse hair on a bow about once a year, provided you're not just leaving your violin in the closet and not practicing it at all. But the hair wears out, as you might suppose with hair. It breaks, especially if you're being a little enthusiastic about things, okay? So the bow, the hair there, I can adjust the tension on the hair just like I can adjust the tension on my strings. When I put my bow away, I want to make sure that the bow isn't working hard all the time, okay? Just like kind of like when we go to sleep, hopefully we relax just a little bit. So I can loosen the hair, okay, such that I'm not straining the bow more than I need to. And then when I go to play, of course I'm tightening it up with this little peg on the end right here. Okay, the mechanism's inside here, all right? Everybody has their own preference for about where they like the tension. We usually test it on our arms like this. If you put your fingers all over this, like 3 little boys have been told not to do on several occasions, the oil from your fingers will make this too slick to play on it. It's like black ice on a road or something like that. Okay? Now I'll tell you, I'm going to be talking a little bit about how we're getting the sound out to you here and how I can make different types of sounds. Aren't you glad I can make different types? The bow has a lot of say, a lot of importance, a big role in what kind of sound comes out. For example, if I want to play a loud note, I'm going to be pressing harder with this arm. This arm has nothing to do with the volume at all, okay? And if I want a softer sound, I'm simply going to press more softly, and in fact I might want to roll it just a bit so that not all of the hair is hitting the string. Yeah? Well, that was it. No, just kidding. All right. So this arm has lots of control over the volume. This arm has all the control over the notes. Okay? So the thing that makes one note different from another on the violin is, first of all, what string are you on? And second of all, are you shortening that string by putting your fingers down? Okay? This part of the neck, this black portion here, is called the fingerboard. Okay? And that's where I would place my fingers to create different notes on the different strings. okay? Right now, with no fingers on it, all of the strings are the same length. They are of different thicknesses, however. The G string, the lowest one, is going to be the thickest, and then that E string is very, very thin. I'll tell you what, I learned the hard way that if your E string breaks while you're playing on stage, it's going to hurt. Those things have some tension and some recoil if they break, and they do. I also replace those about once a year. They get worn out from being stretched and let go and stretched and let go, and all of that. And of course, if I've played enough, then I'm going to wear them out right here too from my fingers, okay? So what I'm doing when I'm playing different notes is I'm essentially shortening the string each time so that the vibrations are getting faster and it sounds higher, okay? How am I doing so far? Oh, yay! Woo! Okay. All right, I thought I would also tell you, because this was interesting to me, the violin has been around for quite some time. The country of Italy was sort of the birthplace of the official violin, the thing that we call the violin. And that was in about the 1500s, that this instrument that we know as the violin came into being. A guy called Andrea Amati is the one that is credited with actually inventing the violin. Now, he based his creation on earlier stringed instruments. They were usually a bit more boxy. They had shorter, thicker necks. Okay? In fact, in some research that I did, I discovered that archaeologists have found a bridge-type piece, something like this, only it's a little wider, that is 2,300 years old. They found it in a cave in Scotland on the Isle of Skye. They say it's a piece of a lyre, which would be an earlier stringed instrument. And it does look incredibly much like the bridge. It's got notches where you can see that the strings went. So the violin's been around for quite some time. It was considered, when first invented, it was not considered an instrument for a lady and a gentleman. It was a low instrument. Of course, we've come a long way. And even when the colonists first came to America, they had a bunch of violins shipped over. In popularity, the violin and the flute, various types of flutes, okay, not necessarily the silver ones we see today, but those were the two most popular instruments. Still, it was considered more proper, particularly for ladies, to play something like a harpsichord or a little something you could set in your lap, like a mandolin, like a guitar. Violin was still considered a little bit beneath the women. Trying to think what else might be helpful to you. As a dancing accompaniment, the violin has long been used in America. Colonists would frequently dance to a solo violin. Now, you're going to hear some solo violin today, but I don't know how to dance, and I'll leave it up to you what you want to do. Okay? All right. The last thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the structure of the violin and how it makes sound is I want to tell you about strings. Oh, strings. You know, I can compare it to my grading pen, okay? Because I grade a lot of papers, and I got a pen that I need to have if I'm going to grade those papers well. And woe to the student who takes my grading pen. Just like I have a pen preference, every violinist is going to have a string preference. For hundreds of years, for the existence of the violin and other string instruments, all strings were made from sheep's intestines. So if you ever hear the term gut string, it is literally a string made out of guts. Of course, as a teenager, this information horrified me entirely, and I have come to be much more of a fan of stainless steel or other type of synthetic strings. Synthetic strings are also easier and cheaper to obtain, but there are still craftsmen who do make gut strings, sheep's intestine strings. They have a different sound quality. It is a nice sound quality, but they're also much more sensitive, much more flexible. I'm so glad we're having this nice weather today. I was a little bit worried yesterday and the day before when it was so cold, because of course with this being made of wood and flexible strings, the temperature change can really affect the sound. If the violin gets too dried out, if it's kept in a really dry environment, it can actually crack. I usually have mine checked once a year when I'm getting the bow rehaired and I'm getting a new set of strings. I have him check for cracks. Okay, and if it gets too hot, it can expand, and then of course that's going to affect the sound in a negative way as well. So I'm glad we've got some good climate control. I can play outside. I have played outside. It's not my favorite thing. Because sometimes when you tell the people that weather made you play a bad note, they don't necessarily believe you. So I'm so glad that we are inside today. Got to make sure I covered everything before I grace you. I think the word grace might be the important one. Grace you with some of my playing. Do you have any questions at this point? Yes, ma'am.
What's the hat?
Oh, thank you. She is asking me about this small gold piece. You might notice that the tiny one has 4 of those little pieces. Those are called fine tuners, is what they're called. If I move the peg on the E string, I almost never do that. If I move the peg on the E string, that little tiny sensitive string is going to be really hard to get back in tune. So turning this fine tuner means that I can adjust the tone of the string by just teensy bits. That's why little tiny violins will come with all fine tuners, because you got to adjust that pitch by very small increments. You know, I didn't mention one piece of the violin that you can't see. There is actually something in there, if you've ever wondered. Again, if you drop your violin, or maybe you're mad at your mom and you dropped it on purpose, that piece that's inside can fall down or be broken. It's a small post that's inside the violin. I can see it from here, but I can't reach it or anything. And it's the sound post. The sound post is helping to get those vibrations from the front to the back of the violin, where they can then resonate out to you. Okay, good question. You get an A. Anybody else? Anybody else?
Where do you keep your violin at home?
In my bedroom closet, so my children do not find it. Yes?
What kind of wood do you usually have a violin?
You know, I wish I could tell you what this one is, but I just don't remember. You've got to get something that you can shape, because you'll notice the back is curved. It would be curved on nearly all violins. It's even curved on this one somewhat. So you've got to get something that you can essentially warp the way that you want to warp it. But I'm not sure. I can tell you that bows are typically made from extremely hard woods, like ebony, like Brazil wood, those types of things. I have no idea. I know I told you how much the bow was worth. My dad didn't tell me what he paid for this, which tells me it was a lot. Yeah. Yes?
How long have you had it?
This one? Well, I'm 39 now, but if you ask me how much I weigh, I'm going to lie to you. But I'm 39 now and I've had it since I was 15. You start out on something tiny, it grows with you, but this is a full size. If it gets any bigger, it's a viola. Yeah. Anybody else?
Have you ever played other stringed instruments?
I have not. No, I used to play the piano, but practicing 2 instruments was just too much for Mom to ask for. So this is the one I focus on. Yes?
Can you still play the little one?
Can I still play the little one? I can make it squeak. It is out of tune. Otherwise, I would definitely offer to play it for you, but I can tell it's out of tune. Guess who the last person who used it was? Not me. A smaller incarnation of me. Anybody else? Just be quiet and play? Yeah? Well, good. I could have come here and talked about English, but I wanted an excuse to play for you. This is the truth. So they said, all right. They're pretty good about humoring me there at the college. I used to play for my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and my great-grandfather's favorite hymn was What a Friend We Have in Jesus. So when I have an opportunity to play, that's typically what I start with. I've prepared a medley of hymns to play for you. It's just me. I don't have an accompaniment or anything, nothing fancy, so I hope that's all right. When I get to Amazing Grace, I'm done. And you can clap or throw your coffee cup, whichever seems more appropriate to you. Okay? Give me just one moment. I tried to be somewhat dressed up for you, but maybe you noticed I'm not wearing any jewelry. Due to my arthritis, my fingers will swell a little bit while I'm playing, and I wouldn't be able to get my ring off, so I took it off before I left the house. Also, I don't wear any earrings or necklaces or anything, because if metal hits this while I'm playing, it makes a horrible noise. I learned that by experience. Let me double check my tuning. I really don't know how loudly this is going to come across, so feel free to give me a hand signal, okay? All right, here we go.
violin?
I don't know. I'm not in the music department.
Oh, you're not?
I know that seems odd. They let me hang out with her daughter in the English department. There's not enough for like a string program officially, but I know that we do have a few students who take lessons.
So you don't give any
I
lessons?
don't give lessons. Yeah, well, not music lessons. You know. Yes.
I watched a lot of public television. I remember one of the Antique Roadshow things when they brought in an old violin and the bow was tremendously valuable, much more than the violin.
Right.
And then I watched Celtic Women, and I don't know how that woman plays and runs around like that. I played the violin, and I played it.
I'm not much of a runner. Yeah. I did check out, you might have heard of a Stradivarius violin. Yes. In 2012, a Stradivarius was sold at auction for $16 million. That was the record, yes.
What kind of bow went with it?
I don't think any bow, honestly, yes.
And I did have a brother who played, he had perfect pitch.
I wish I had
And
that.
he could play anything on the violin you wanted, and whatever key you wanted, it didn't matter.
Wow.
I couldn't do that. I did take violin, and I wonder how many people around here took some kind of string instrument somewhere along the way.
Strings, anybody admit to it? Yep,
Strings.
1, 2. All right, 3, 4. All right, very good.
Pianos have strings.
There you go. Piano has a lot of strings. I don't recommend bowing them. Yes.
I noticed with your bow, it was twisting.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Okay, so it would be very awkward for me to try to keep it flat. The natural movement is to curve in like this. It also will mellow out the sound. You get this end is much heavier than this end, so that's helping me to keep it the way that to keep it from flying off into outer space. There is a particular bow stroke called spiccato. It's different than staccato, and it's when the composer calls on you to actually bounce it on purpose. And then I would be using the flat of the hair to create that bouncing effect. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
How did you make it sound like you're playing two notes at the same time with it as well with my silver?
I was playing 2 strings at one time. It's something called a double stop. When you do a double stop, you want to make sure you're doing it on purpose. And you do have to really practice those in particular because you're trying to make the 2 pitches coordinate. You guys haven't asked the question I always get, and that is, what's the difference between a violin and a fiddle? Were you dying to know? Well, there is one. But it's the same instrument, but I read that some fiddle players, like those folks down in Branson and stuff, they really like to fancy things up with those double stops and even triple stops. And what they do to accomplish that is file down the bridge very slightly so that the strings are, in essence, closer together, and they can hit those notes intentionally like that. Other questions? Yes?
Do you play staccato?
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody does, just, and again, that's just something that the composer would put in music if he wants a particular part to be plucked. Tends to have a more quiet and definitely a more short, choppy effect if that's what the composer is going for. It's nearly always done with this hand. In fact, if we have long sections of pizzicato, which does happen in symphonies, we would just set the bow down entirely. And just pluck it. Yeah. Yes?
Do you have a favorite composer?
A favorite composer? Gosh. I'm going to say that I've always enjoyed Brahms. But honestly, this is the music I grew up hearing, and that's what I like the best. So God is my answer.